The cantina on Nexus Station fell silent when the news broadcast began. Every alien in the crowded bar stopped drinking and turned toward the holographic display floating above the central table. The blue light flickered as the Galactic News network anchor spoke with barely controlled fear in her voice. Breaking news from the Outer Rim territories. The hunter known as Vexthar has claimed another trophy. The entire population of Kepler-7 now lives in terror after witnessing what happened to the crystal bears. A collective shudder ran through the cantina. Everyone knew about the crystal bears of Arcturus Prime. Those massive creatures stood 4 meters tall and had diamond-hard skin that could deflect plasma rifles. They were considered the apex predators of their world. Nothing could kill them. Nothing except Vexthar. The broadcast continued with shaky footage from a security drone. It showed a barren landscape littered with massive crystalline corpses. In the center stood a towering figure nearly 3 meters tall. His obsidian scales gleamed in the alien sunlight. Razor-sharp claws dripped with luminescent blood. This was Vexithar, the Death Shadow, the most feared hunter in 17 star systems. In the cantina, a Zephyrian trader whispered to his companion, "I heard he took down all 12 crystal bears in a single day, used nothing but his claws and teeth." His friend, a purple-skinned Volteron, shook his head. "My cousin worked salvage in that sector. He said the bears never even had a chance to fight back. Vexthar moved like smoke through their crystal caves." At a corner table, an old spacer captain named Gorvek remembered his own encounter with the legendary hunter. 5 years ago, his cargo ship had broken down near the Bone Harvester, Vexithar's personal vessel. The hunter could have easily boarded and killed everyone aboard. Instead, he had simply observed them through his ship's sensors, before moving on. Gorvek never understood why Vexthar had spared them that day. The Bone Harvester was as famous as its owner. The massive black ship stretched over 2 kilometers from nose to tail. Its hull was decorated with the skulls and bones of creatures from across the galaxy. Viewing ports lined the sides, each one displaying a different trophy. The ship served as both a traveling museum and a warning to anyone who might challenge its master. Inside the ship, Vexthar maintained his collection with obsessive care. The main trophy hall contained over 300 preserved heads mounted on the walls. Each one represented a different species, a different world, a different hunt. There were the phase wolves from the Nebular Rim, creatures that could shift between dimensions. Their ghostly heads still seemed to flicker in and out of reality even in death. Near the center of the hall hung the massive skull of a void leviathan, a space-dwelling creature the size of a small moon. Vexthar had hunted it through an asteroid field for 6 months before finally bringing it down. The kill had made him famous throughout the galaxy, but fame was not what drove Vexthar. He hunted because he was born to hunt. The Krell species had evolved on a world where only the strongest survived. Every Krell was a natural predator, but Vexthar had surpassed even his own kind. His reflexes were faster, his senses sharper, his killing instinct more refined than any other member of his species. The Krell Empire had tried to recruit him as a military asset. They offered him command of entire fleets, promising him worlds to conquer. Vexthar had turned them down. Conquest was too easy, too simple. He wanted challenge. He wanted prey that could surprise him, creatures that could make him work for his victories. Over the decades, Vexthar had hunted every dangerous species known to galactic science. He had tracked the shadow-stepping umbrals through their pocket dimensions. He had faced the psychic cerebroids in mental combat. He had even hunted the legendary star serpents in the vacuum of space itself, wearing nothing but a breathing mask. Each victory had brought him satisfaction, but lately that satisfaction lasted shorter and shorter periods. The thrill of the hunt was beginning to fade. Vexithar found himself searching for something new, something that could reignite the passion that had driven him for so long. That search had led him to study the galactic databases, looking for species he had not yet encountered. Most were too weak to provide any real challenge. The peaceful Harmonians were skilled negotiators but completely defenseless. The crystalline collective were beautiful to observe, but fragile as glass. The aquatic depths dwellers never left their ocean worlds. Then he found an entry that caught his attention. A relatively new species had recently achieved faster-than-light travel. They called themselves humans, and they came from a world they named Earth. The database entry was brief and largely dismissive. Humans were described as physically weak, lacking natural armor or weapons. They had no psychic abilities, no special evolutionary advantages. They were considered one of the most vulnerable species in the galaxy. But something about them intrigued Vexthar. Perhaps it was their rapid technological advancement despite their physical limitations. Perhaps it was the way they had spread to several colony worlds in just a few decades. Or perhaps it was simply that he had never hunted anything quite like them before. The more he researched, the more interesting they became. Humans seemed to possess an unusual trait that other species found disturbing. They formed emotional bonds with members of other species. They showed compassion to creatures that were not their own kind. Some reports even described humans risking their lives to save aliens they barely knew. This behavior made no sense from an evolutionary perspective. In the natural order, species protected their own and eliminated threats. Humans seemed to operate by different rules entirely. They were unpredictable in ways that Vexthar found both fascinating and puzzling. His decision was made during a meditation session in his trophy hall. Surrounded by the heads of the galaxy's most dangerous creatures, Vexthar realized he had been hunting the wrong type of prey. Physical danger was no longer enough. He needed something that would challenge not just his body, but his mind. Humans represented the ultimate paradox. They were weak enough that hunting them should be trivial, yet they had somehow survived and thrived in a galaxy full of species that should have eliminated them long ago. There had to be something more to them than the databases revealed. Vexthar began preparing for his journey to Earth. He studied their military capabilities, their social structures, their history. What he found only deepened his curiosity. Humans had a documented history of warfare that spanned thousands of years, yet they also created art, music, and literature. They destroyed and created with equal passion. The Bone Harvester's engines came to life as Vexthar set course for the Sol system. Behind him, his trophy collection watched with empty eyes. Soon, he hoped those walls would display something new. The head of a human would make an excellent addition to his collection. As his ship entered hyperspace, Vexthar allowed himself a rare moment of anticipation. He had no idea that this hunt would be unlike any other he had undertaken. He could not predict that the prey he sought would change everything he thought he knew about strength, power, and what it meant to be a predator. The journey to Earth would take several standard weeks. Vexthar spent the time refining his hunting strategies and studying every piece of information he could find about human behavior. He was thorough in his preparations because he respected his prey enough to give them his best effort. What he did not realize was that the humans were preparing for him as well. Dr. Kim Hyok adjusted his glasses and stared at the data streaming across his computer screen. The numbers made no sense. The alien transmission they had intercepted 3 days ago contained patterns that seemed almost impossible to decode. But slowly, piece by piece, the message was becoming clear, and what it revealed made his blood run cold. The Sol Research Institute buzzed with quiet activity even at this late hour. Most of his colleagues had gone home hours ago, but Hyok remained at his desk in the xenobiology department. He had been working on alien communication patterns for the past 5 years, ever since humanity made first contact with the galactic community. His specialty was translating the complex languages of species that thought in ways completely different from humans. This particular transmission had arrived through deep space monitoring stations 2 weeks ago. The message was brief, but contained references to something called the Death Shadow and coordinates that pointed directly to Earth. At first, the translation team thought it might be a poetic description of some natural phenomenon. Space was full of dangerous things like black holes and gamma-ray bursts that could be described as death-bringing shadows. But as Hyok worked through more of the translation, a terrifying picture began to emerge. The Death Shadow was not a thing. It was a someone. The message was a hunting declaration and Earth was the target. Dr. Park Gina entered the lab carrying 2 cups of coffee. She was Hayek's research partner and one of the few people who understood his dedication to his work. Gina had been studying alien psychology, while Hayek focused on language patterns. Together, they made a good team. "You need to sleep," Gina said, setting one cup down next to his keyboard. "You have been staring at that screen for 14 hours straight." Hayek took the coffee gratefully, but did not look away from his work. "I think I know what this message means. And if I am right, we have a very serious problem." Gina pulled up a chair next to him. She had learned to trust Hayek's instincts about alien communications. He had an unusual gift for understanding how different species organized their thoughts and expressed their ideas. "Tell me what you found." "The transmission is from something called Vexthar. The name appears in 17 different galactic databases. He is described as a hunter who has never failed to kill his chosen prey. The aliens call him the Death Shadow because he moves without being seen and strikes without warning." Gina felt her stomach tighten. "And he is coming here?" "According to this message, he has already left his last hunting ground. His ship was detected entering our solar system yesterday. The Terran Defense Council received the same intelligence. We did, but they are keeping it classified to prevent panic." The two scientists sat in silence for several minutes, both understanding the implications of what they had discovered. Humanity had been part of the galactic community for only a few decades. They were still considered newcomers, barely more advanced than primitive species that had not yet developed space travel. If a legendary hunter was targeting Earth, there was very little anyone could do to stop him. "What does he want?" Gina asked finally. Hayek scrolled through more of the translated text. "From what I can understand, he hunts for sport. He collects trophies from the most dangerous creatures he can find across the galaxy. Apparently, he has decided that humans would make an interesting addition to his collection." The irony was not lost on either of them. Humans were considered one of the weakest species in the galaxy. They had no natural armor like the Krell, no psychic abilities like the Cerebroids, no technological advantages like the Synthetic Collective. Most alien species viewed humans as harmless curiosities, barely worth notice. Yet somehow, this had attracted the attention of the galaxy's most feared predator. Over the next 2 days, news of the approaching threat spread through the highest levels of Earth's government. President Chen called an emergency session of the Global Defense Committee. Military leaders from every major nation gathered in Geneva to discuss response options. Captain Lee Minho represented the Terran Space Force at these meetings. He was a career military officer who had spent the last 10 years helping humanity develop its space-based defenses. Minho was realistic about their chances against an opponent like Vexthar. Earth's weapons technology was decades behind most galactic species. Their ships were slower, their shields were weaker, and their military tactics were designed for fighting other humans, not alien predators. "We have 12 patrol vessels in the outer system," Minho reported to the committee. "They are armed with fusion missiles and plasma cannons. Against a normal opponent, they might be effective. But according to intelligence reports, Vexthar's ship is over 2 kilometers long and heavily armored. Our weapons might not even scratch it." Defense Minister Rodriguez leaned forward. "What about evacuation? Can we move the population to the colonies?" "Not in time," Minho replied. "Even if we started today, we could only move a few million people before he arrives, and there is no guarantee he would not simply follow them to the colony worlds." The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. Earth lacked the military power to fight Vexthar directly. Their only hope was to try diplomacy, though no one had any realistic expectations that it would work. That evening, Dr. Hayek sat in his small apartment reading everything he could find about the Krell species. If they were going to attempt communication with Vexthar, someone needed to understand how his mind worked. The more Hayek learned, the more fascinated he became. The Krell were apex predators from a world where survival depended entirely on hunting skill. Their entire culture revolved around the concept of the hunt. They respected strength, cunning, and the ability to track and kill dangerous prey. What they did not respect was weakness or cowardice. Most species that encountered Vexthar tried to hide from him or bargain for their lives. According to the historical records, these approaches never worked. The hunter seemed to view fear and desperation as signs of weakness that made his prey less worthy of respect. But what if someone approached him differently? What if instead of showing fear, they showed interest? What if they treated the encounter as a scientific opportunity rather than a death sentence? The idea was completely insane, but Hyak could not stop thinking about it. He began drafting a proposal that would have made his colleagues think he had lost his mind. The next morning, Hyak requested a meeting with the Global Defense Committee. Gina tried to talk him out of it, knowing that what he was planning was essentially suicide. But Hyak had convinced himself that understanding could bridge any gap between species, no matter how dangerous one of them might be. "You want to do what?" Captain Minho stared at Hyak across the conference table. "I want to make first contact," Hyak repeated calmly. "I believe that Vexthar is coming here because he is curious about humans. If we can satisfy that curiosity through peaceful communication, there might not need to be any violence." Defense Minister Rodriguez shook her head. "Doctor, this creature has killed representatives of dozens of species. He does not negotiate. He hunts. But he has never encountered humans before," Hyak insisted. "Every species he has hunted tried to fight him or run from him. What if we try something different? What if we approach him with scientific interest instead of fear?" The room fell silent. Everyone present understood that they were discussing sending a man to his certain death. But they also understood that conventional military responses had no chance of success. President Chen spoke finally. "Dr. Kim, I appreciate your courage, but we cannot ask you to sacrifice yourself for a plan that has no realistic chance of working. With respect, Madam President, every plan we have discussed has no realistic chance of working. At least this approach might teach us something about our opponent before we all die." Hyak's words hung in the air like a challenge. He was right, and everyone in the room knew it. Earth's military could not stop Vexithar. Their evacuation plans could not save more than a tiny fraction of the population. Diplomacy was their only remaining option, no matter how slim the chances of success might be. Captain Minho finally broke the silence. "If we are going to attempt this, we need to do it right. We send you out in our fastest ship with our best communication equipment. If things go wrong, you get out of there immediately." Hyak nodded, though they all knew that running away would not be an option once he was face to face with the galaxy's ultimate hunter. 3 days later, the small diplomatic vessel Harmony left Earth orbit with Dr. Kim Hyak as its only passenger. His mission was to make first contact with Vexthar and attempt to negotiate for humanity's survival. Behind him, 6 billion humans held their breath and waited to see if curiosity and understanding could triumph over predatory instinct. The bone harvester hung in space like a dark monument to death. Dr. Kim Hyak's small diplomatic ship looked tiny beside the massive hunter vessel. Through his viewport, he could see the trophy displays lining the alien ship's hull. Skulls and bones from countless creatures stared back at him with empty eye sockets. Hyak took a deep breath and activated his communication system. "This is Dr. Kim Hyak of Earth, requesting permission to board your vessel. I come seeking dialogue with the hunter known as Vexthar." The response came immediately, though not in words. A tractor beam locked onto his ship and began pulling it toward a docking bay. Hyak had expected this. Everything he had read about Krell psychology suggested that Vexthar would be curious about any prey bold enough to approach him voluntarily. The docking bay was enormous, easily large enough to hold 20 ships the size of Hyak's vessel. As the atmospheric shields activated and air filled the space, Hyak gathered his equipment. He carried 3 cases containing scientific instruments, biological scanners, and detailed research files about Krell physiology and hunting patterns. The airlock cycled open with a hiss. Hyak stepped onto the deck of the most feared ship in the galaxy, his heart hammering against his ribs. The bay was dimly lit, filled with shadows that seemed to move and shift. Then one of the shadows stepped forward, and Hyak found himself face to face with death itself. Vexthar was even more imposing than the intelligence reports had suggested. Nearly 3 meters of pure predatory evolution, his obsidian scales gleamed in the low light. His eyes were golden and reptilian, with pupils that contracted to thin vertical slits as they focused on the small human before him. Razor-sharp claws extended from his fingertips, each one longer than Hyak's entire hand. So, Vexthar's voice was a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the deck plating. The prey comes to me willingly. How interesting. Hyak forced himself to remain calm. Fear would accomplish nothing here. Instead, he did something that surprised both himself and the alien hunter. He smiled. I prefer to think of this as a research opportunity, Hyak said, setting down his equipment cases. I have spent years studying predator-prey relationships across different species. I have never had the chance to observe the galaxy's most successful hunter up close. Vexthar tilted his massive head, studying the human with obvious puzzlement. In all his centuries of hunting, no prey had ever spoken to him this way. They screamed, they begged, they tried to bargain for their lives. This small creature was discussing him like a scientific specimen. You are not afraid, Vexthar observed. It was not a question. I am terrified, Hyak admitted honestly. But fear and fascination are not mutually exclusive emotions. Your evolutionary adaptations are remarkable. The way your claws curve at precisely the optimal angle for maximum penetration. The positioning of your eyes for perfect depth perception. During pursuit, your species clearly evolved for pursuit hunting rather than ambush tactics. The hunter moved closer, his footsteps silent despite his massive size. Hyak noticed this immediately and made a note in his mental file. Your movement patterns suggest specialized bone structure in the feet. Cartilage padding, perhaps? It would explain how you achieve such silent locomotion despite your mass. Vexthar stopped just arm's length away from the human, his claws extended, further, the tips now only centimeters from Hyak's throat. I could kill you in a dozen different ways before you could even blink. Absolutely, Hyak agreed, pulling out a biological scanner and pointing it at the hunter's claws. May I take some measurements? The tensile strength of those claws must be extraordinary. I would estimate they could penetrate standard starship hull plating with minimal effort. For the first time in his long life, Vexthar found himself completely off balance. This was not how prey was supposed to behave. The human should be cowering, pleading for mercy or at least trying to run. Instead, he was asking for scientific data. You wish to study me? Vexthar said slowly. I wish to understand you, Hyak corrected. There is a difference. Understanding requires respect for the subject being studied. I respect what you are, Vexthar. You represent the pinnacle of predatory evolution. Every aspect of your being has been refined over millions of years to make you the perfect hunter. Vexthar retracted his claws slightly. The human's words carried no flattery or deception. This was simple scientific appreciation for evolutionary design. It was unlike anything he had ever encountered. My species calls me Death Shadow, Vexthar said. Your people will learn to do the same when I have finished with them. Hyak nodded thoughtfully. An appropriate title. Your stealth capabilities are clearly exceptional. But I am curious about your hunting methodology. Do you prefer to study your prey extensively before engaging? Or do you rely more on instinctive responses during the actual hunt? The question caught Vexthar off guard. No one had ever asked him about his techniques before. Prey did not engage in casual conversation about hunting strategies. Yet he found himself genuinely interested in the discussion. I study first, he admitted. Understanding prey behavior is essential for an efficient kill. Those who hunt without knowledge fail more often than they succeed. Exactly what I expected, Hyak said with obvious satisfaction. A purely instinctive hunter would never achieve your success rate. You combine natural physical abilities with learned intelligence. That combination is what makes you unique in the galaxy. Vexthar found himself walking alongside the human as they moved deeper into his ship. This was not how he had planned for this encounter to proceed. He had expected to kill the human within minutes of his arrival. Instead, he was giving him a tour of the bone harvester. They entered the main trophy hall, and Hyak stopped in genuine amazement. Hundreds of alien skulls lined the walls, each one representing a different species from across the galaxy. The display was both terrifying and magnificent in its scope. Incredible, Hayek breathed. This collection represents decades of successful hunts across multiple star systems. Each trophy tells a story of adaptation, pursuit, and ultimate victory. He moved to examine a massive crystalline skull. This is from a crystal bear of Arcturus Prime. I read about your hunt there. 12 apex predators eliminated in a single day. The tactical planning alone must have been extraordinary. Vexathar watched the human study his trophies with scientific fascination rather than horror. It was a completely new experience for him. The crystal bears were challenging, he admitted. Their diamond-hard skin deflected conventional weapons. I had to find weak points in their armor plating. The eye sockets and joint connections, Hyuk observed, pointing to scoring marks on the skull. You used precision strikes rather than brute force, efficient and elegant. They spent the next several hours moving through the trophy hall. Hyuk asked detailed questions about hunting strategies, prey behavior, and environmental factors that had influenced different hunts. Vexthar found himself answering with increasing enthusiasm. Never before had anyone shown genuine interest in his work as both art and science. Your hunting techniques represent a perfect fusion of physical capability and intellectual analysis, Hayek concluded as they completed their tour. But I am curious about something. With all your success, all your victories, do you ever find yourself wanting something more challenging? The question struck deeper than Vexthar expected. Lately, he had indeed been feeling restless. Each hunt seemed easier than the last. Victory came too quickly. Satisfaction lasted too briefly. He had been searching for something new, something that could reignite the passion that had driven him for so long. Perhaps, he admitted carefully. Hyuk smiled. Then I have a proposition for you. Something that would test not just your physical abilities but your intelligence and adaptability as well. A hunt, unlike any you have attempted before. Vexthar's golden eyes narrowed with interest. Speak. What if I told you there was prey that could think like you do? Prey that could plan, adapt, and use tools as sophisticated as your own? Prey that would fight back not with claws or teeth but with cunning and strategy? The hunter leaned forward. This human had his complete attention now. I am speaking of criminal humans, Hyuk continued. Killers, pirates, and war criminals who have escaped justice throughout the galaxy. They possess advanced technology, intimate knowledge of human psychology, and the desperate cunning that comes from having nothing left to lose. Vexthar considered this proposal. Hunting intelligent prey was indeed more challenging than stalking wild beasts, but there was something else about the idea that intrigued him even more. You would help me hunt your own kind? He said. I would. Help you hunt criminals who deserve justice, Hayek corrected. There is a difference between innocent humans and those who have chosen to become predators themselves. For the first time in centuries, Vexthar felt genuinely excited about a hunt. This small human had offered him something no other prey had ever provided. Intellectual partnership instead of simple fear. This arrangement would be temporary, Vexthar warned. When we are finished hunting criminals, I will still require human trophies for my collection. Hyuk nodded calmly. We can discuss that when the time comes. For now, I suggest we focus on our first target. I have identified several candidates who would provide excellent challenges for Nur. The datapad in Dr. Hayek's hands contained the profiles of 12 of the most dangerous human criminals in the galaxy. Each one had committed crimes that put them beyond redemption. Each one had escaped justice through cunning, violence, or simple luck. And each one would provide Vexthar with the kind of challenge he had been searching for. This one, Hayek said, pointing to a holographic image that appeared above the table in Vexthar's war room. His name is Oshung, former Terran Defense Force colonel turned space pirate. He has been terrorizing merchant vessels in the Outer Rim for 3 years. Vexathar studied the image with interest. Oshung looked ordinary enough. Middle-aged, average height, unremarkable features. But Hayek had learned that appearances meant nothing when dealing with dangerous humans. He does not look formidable, Vexthar observed. That is exactly what makes him dangerous, Hayek explained. Oshung was one of our best military strategists, Before he turned criminal, he understands human psychology better than most trained psychologists. His victims never see him coming because he appears harmless until the moment he strikes. The file contained details of Oh Seung's crimes. 17 merchant ships attacked, their crews either killed or sold into slavery. 3 space stations, raided for supplies and equipment. 2 entire colony worlds held hostage for ransom payments. The man was responsible for over 400 deaths and countless acts of brutality. His last known location was the Kepler mining station in the asteroid belt, Hayek continued. Intelligence reports suggest he has taken control of the facility and is using it as a base for his operations. The miners are being held as forced labor. Vexithar downloaded the tactical information to his ship's computer systems. The Kepler mining station was built into a large asteroid with multiple levels extending deep into the rock. It would provide plenty of places to hide, numerous potential ambush points and limited escape routes. Perfect hunting ground. How many followers does he have? Vexthar asked. Unknown, but probably between 20 and 30 armed pirates. They are loyal to Oh Seung because he keeps them rich and alive. They will fight hard to protect him. The hunter nodded approvingly. Multiple opponents would make the hunt more interesting. He began analyzing the station's layout, identifying weak points and planning potential approach vectors. There is something else you should know about human criminals, Hayek said. They do not follow the same behavioral patterns as wild animals. Oh Seung will not simply run when he realizes he is being hunted. He will try to turn the tables and become the hunter himself. This information made Vexthar pause. In all his years of hunting, prey had always tried to escape when confronted with a superior predator. The idea of prey attempting to hunt the hunter was both disturbing and exciting. Explain, he demanded. Hyok pulled up more files on his data. Human psychology includes something we call spite. When cornered, some humans will choose to fight even when they know they cannot win. They would rather die trying to hurt their enemy than surrender or run away. This makes them unpredictable. Exactly. Oh Seung is intelligent, desperate, and has nothing left to lose. He will use every trick, every weapon, every advantage he can find. He might try to use the other miners as human shields. He might attempt to damage the station's life support systems to force you to retreat. He might even try to ram his ship into yours in a suicide attack. Vexithar felt a thrill of anticipation, unlike anything he had experienced in decades. This would not be a simple hunt, where superior physical abilities guaranteed victory. This would be a battle of minds as well as bodies. The journey to Kepler Station took 6 standard days. During that time, Hyuk and Vexthar worked together to develop their hunting strategy. The human provided insights into criminal psychology, while the hunter contributed tactical expertise gained from centuries of successful hunts. Oh Seung will have sentries posted at all the obvious approach routes, Hyuk explained as they studied 3-dimensional maps of the asteroid. But he will also have backup plans in case his first line of defense fails. He always thinks 3 steps ahead. Then we must think 4 steps ahead, Vexithar replied. What would he least expect? Hyok considered this question carefully. A direct frontal assault. Most hunters prefer stealth and surprise. Oh Seung will be prepared for someone trying to sneak in. He will not be expecting an opponent confident enough to announce their presence. The plan they developed was unlike anything Vexthar had ever attempted. Instead of approaching silently under cover of darkness, they would arrive openly and make their intentions clear. This would force Oh Seung to react according to his defensive preparations, rather than allowing him time to spring an ambush. When they reached the asteroid belt, the bone harvester's sensors immediately detected the mining station. It was larger than expected, with multiple docking bays and industrial facilities extending deep into the rock. Several small patrol ships moved, in regular patterns around the perimeter. This is Vexthar aboard the vessel Bone Harvester, the hunter broadcast on all frequencies. I seek the human criminal known as Oh Seung. Surrender yourself for judgment or I will come and collect you myself. The response came within minutes. Oh Seung's face appeared on the main viewing screen, showing a man with graying hair and cold, intelligent eyes. So the famous Death Shadow has come calling. I am honored by the attention. You know who I am, Vexthar stated. I know your reputation, Osung replied. I also know that you have never hunted anything quite like me before. Are you prepared for prey that can think like a predator? Vexthar bared his teeth in what might have been a smile. I am looking forward to the experience. The communication ended, and immediately the asteroid's defensive systems came online. Missile launchers emerged from hidden ports in the rock. Energy weapons began targeting the bone harvester. Osung was not wasting time on further conversation. Impressive, Vexthar admitted, as he maneuvered his ship out of the weapon's targeting range. He transitioned from negotiation to combat, without hesitation. That is how Osung operates, Hyok said. He uses conversation to gather intelligence about his enemies, then strikes when they least expect it. The first phase of the hunt began as Vexthar used his ship's superior firepower to systematically destroy the asteroid's external defenses. But this was just the opening move. The real hunt would take place inside the mining facility itself. They docked at an auxiliary port that Osung had apparently abandoned. The airlock showed signs of hasty sabotage, but Vexthar's equipment easily overcame the damaged seals. As they entered the station, emergency lights cast eerie red shadows through the corridors. He has cut main power, Hyok observed. This forces us to rely on portable lighting, which will make us easier to spot. Or it makes an ambush more likely, Vexthar added. His enhanced senses were already detecting the scents of multiple humans somewhere in the facility. At least 20 individuals, possibly more. They moved carefully through the mining station's maze of tunnels and chambers. Hyok used his scientific instruments to map their route while Vexthar relied on his predatory instincts to detect potential threats. The combination proved effective as they avoided 3 separate ambush points that Osung had prepared. He is watching us, Vexthar said as they paused at a junction between 2 main corridors. I can sense eyes tracking our movements. Hyok nodded toward a security camera mounted high on the wall. He has access to the station's surveillance network. He knows exactly where we are at all times. This was a new experience for Vexthar. Usually his prey ran blindly, driven by fear and desperation. Osung was observing them with the cold calculation of a fellow predator. It was both frustrating and exhilarating. They found the first group of pirates in the main mining chamber. 6 armed humans had positioned themselves behind industrial equipment, creating a crossfire pattern that would have been deadly to most opponents. But Vexthar was not most opponents. The battle was brief and brutal. Vexthar moved with inhuman speed, his claws and teeth turning the mining chamber into an abattoir. But even as he fought, he noticed that these pirates were not fighting like desperate criminals. They moved with military precision, covering each other's retreats and attempting coordinated tactics. Osung trained them well, Hyok observed as they moved past the bodies. These were not random thugs. They were soldiers. They fought with honor, Vexthar agreed. I respect that. They continued deeper into the station, encountering increasingly sophisticated traps and defensive positions. Osung was using the facility's industrial equipment as weapons, turning mining lasers into directed energy weapons and repurposing excavation charges as improvised explosives. He is adapting his tactics based on our performance, Hyuk noted, after they narrowly avoided a collapsed tunnel. Each trap is designed to counter the methods we used to overcome the previous one. Vexthar found himself genuinely impressed with their opponent's strategic thinking. This was not the mindless cunning of a cornered animal. This was intelligence applied with deadly precision. The final confrontation came in the station's command center. Osung waited for them alone, having sent his remaining followers to evacuate the civilian miners. He stood behind a console filled with blinking lights and status displays. The detention cell aboard the bone harvester was designed to hold the galaxy's most dangerous creatures, but Osung sat calmly in the energy restraints as if he were attending a business meeting. Through the transparent aluminum barrier, he watched Vexthar and Dr. Hyok discuss their next course of action. He surrendered too easily, Vexthar said, his golden eyes never leaving their prisoner. Predators do not simply give up when cornered. Hayek nodded in agreement. Oh Sung is planning something. The question is what? 3 days had passed since their confrontation at the mining station. Oh Sung had offered no resistance when they transferred him to the bone harvester, had answered their questions about other criminals with helpful detail, and had even provided tactical advice about hunting techniques that would work best against human opponents. It was all very suspicious. Perhaps we should ask him directly, Hyuk suggested. They entered the detention area together. Oh Seung looked up from the datapad he had been reading, one of several books about galactic history that Vexthar had provided to keep him occupied. Gentlemen, Oh Seung greeted them with a slight smile. I trust you have been studying the files I gave you about your next targets. We have, Vexthar replied. But first I want to understand your motivations. Why did you surrender so easily? Oh Seung set down the datapad and leaned back in his restraints. Because I am curious to see how this partnership of yours develops. You represent something unique in the galaxy, Vexthar. A predator who has learned to think beyond simple killing. I am still a predator, Vexthar warned. Yes, but you are an evolved predator. Dr. Kim has introduced you to concepts that your species has never experienced before. Cooperation, intellectual partnership, moral judgment. I find that fascinating. Hyuk stepped closer to the barrier. You think we will fail? I think you will change, Oh Seung corrected. Both of you. This partnership will transform you in ways you cannot yet imagine. I surrendered because I want to see what you become. The conversation was interrupted by an alarm from the ship's communication system. An encrypted message had arrived from Earth marked as urgent priority. Hyuk activated the holographic display and read the contents with growing concern. What is it? Vexthar asked. Intelligence reports about our next target, Hyuk replied. The situation is more serious than we expected. The message contained updated information about their chosen prey, a human criminal named Kang Woo-jin. Originally a geneticist working for a pharmaceutical company, Kang had been caught conducting illegal experiments on sentient beings. He had escaped custody during transport to trial and disappeared into the lawless regions of space. Recent intelligence suggested that Kang had established a hidden laboratory on an abandoned space station. There he continued his experiments, kidnapping victims from passing ships to use as test subjects for his biological weapons research. This one will be different from Oh Seung, Hyuk warned as they reviewed the file. Kang Woo-jin has no honor, no military training, no tactical expertise. What he has is complete disregard for any form of morality. The space station appeared on their long-range sensors 2 days later. It was a derelict facility that had once served as a research outpost for a mining consortium. Now it drifted in the void between star systems, dark and seemingly abandoned. Life signs? Vexthar asked. Multiple readings, his ship's computer replied. Approximately 30 biological signatures detected. Some appear to be in distress. They approached the station carefully. Unlike Oh Seung, who had prepared elaborate defenses, Kang Woo-jin seemed to rely on the remote location to keep unwanted visitors away. The station's docking ports were operational but unguarded. Too easy, Vexthar muttered as they prepared to board. Kang is not a soldier, Hyuk reminded him. He is a scientist. His weapons are diseases and genetic modifications, not conventional firearms. They entered the station through an airlock that showed signs of recent use. The corridors beyond were dimly lit and filled with an unsettling chemical smell. Hyuk's instruments detected traces of various biological agents in the air, though nothing immediately dangerous. The first laboratory they discovered contained equipment for genetic manipulation and biological synthesis. Tables covered with scientific instruments surrounded holding tanks filled with murky liquid. Some of the tanks contained shapes that might once have been living creatures, though they were now twisted beyond recognition. What did he do to them? Vexthar asked, examining one of the failed experiments. Genetic modification attempts, Hyuk replied, reading data from a nearby computer terminal. He was trying to enhance human physical capabilities by splicing alien DNA into the genome. They found the first group of victims in a makeshift prison block deeper in the station, 23 beings from various species, all showing signs of malnutrition and medical experimentation. Some bore surgical scars where tissue samples had been removed. Others displayed obvious genetic mutations that left them barely recognizable as their original species. He used them as laboratory animals, Vexthar observed, his voice carrying a note of disgust that surprised Hyok. This was the first time the hunter had shown any emotional response to the suffering of potential prey. Usually Vexthar viewed other creatures with the detached interest of a professional predator, but something about Kang's victims seemed to affect him differently. "Can they be helped?" Vexthar asked. Hyok examined the prisoners with his medical scanner. Most were beyond treatment, their genetic structure so damaged that they could not survive without constant life support. A few might be saved if they received immediate medical attention. "We need to get them to a proper medical facility," Hyok said. "But first we have to find Kang." They continued through the station, following traces of recent activity toward the main laboratory complex. Along the way, they encountered more evidence of Kang's work: rooms full of preserved specimens, storage areas containing samples from dozens of different species, computer files documenting years of illegal experimentation. "This is not hunting," Vexthar said as they reviewed the research data. "This is torture disguised as science." The distinction seemed important to him. Vexthar killed for sport and trophies, but his kills were clean and relatively quick. What Kang had done to his victims involved prolonged suffering with no purpose beyond satisfying twisted curiosity. They found Kang Woo-jin in the central laboratory, a vast chamber filled with advanced medical equipment and rows of specimen containers. He was a thin, pale man in his 50s, wearing a stained lab coat over casual clothing. He looked up from his work as they entered, showing no surprise at their arrival. "The famous Death Shadow," Kang said calmly. "I have been expecting you. You know why we are here," Vexthar stated. "Of course." Dr. Kim's little crusade to clean up human criminal behavior. Very noble, though ultimately pointless. Kang gestured toward the specimens surrounding them. "Humans are inherently destructive. We consume, we corrupt, we destroy. It is our nature." Hyok stepped forward. "That does not excuse what you have done here." Kang laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. "Excuse? I am not seeking excuses. I am conducting research. These specimens represent the future of human evolution." He moved to one of the larger containers, which held what had once been a Zephyrian trader. The creature's natural blue skin had been modified to a sickly green color, and additional limbs had been grafted onto its torso. It was still alive, its eyes tracking movement with obvious intelligence and pain. "Beautiful." "Is it not?" Kang asked. "I am improving the design, making it more efficient, more adaptable." Vexthar's claws extended involuntarily. "You are torturing innocent beings for your own amusement." "I am advancing scientific knowledge," Kang corrected. "The suffering is regrettable but necessary. How else can we understand the limits of biological adaptation?" The argument continued for several minutes, with Kang defending his work as legitimate research while Hyok and Vexthar pointed out the obvious moral violations involved. But as they talked, Hyok began to notice something disturbing about the laboratory around them. Many of the specimens were still alive, still conscious, still suffering, and they had been this way for months, possibly years. "We are ending this now," Vexthar declared, moving toward Kang with deadly intent. But the criminal scientist was not as helpless as he appeared. His hand moved to a control panel on the nearest workstation, and suddenly the laboratory was filled with a fine mist sprayed from hidden nozzles throughout the chamber. "Biological agent," Hyok warned, immediately covering his breathing apparatus. Vexthar's enhanced immune system protected him from most toxins, but he could feel the effects of whatever Kang had released. His movements became sluggish. His vision began to blur. The weapon was specifically designed to affect predatory species. "Did you think I would be unprepared?" Kang asked as he moved toward another control station. "I have been studying your biology for weeks, ever since I learned you were hunting human criminals." This toxin will not kill you, but it will make you manageable. Hyok tried to reach his emergency medical kit, but his hands were already shaking from the effects of the biological weapon. Around them, the imprisoned specimens began to stir as Kang activated their containment systems. I think you will make excellent additions to my collection, Kang continued. 6 months had passed since the hunt for Kang Woo-jin, and the partnership between Vexithar and Dr. Kim Hyok had become legendary throughout the galaxy. News of their collaboration spread from system to system, carried by traders, diplomats, and refugees who had been saved from human criminals. The story was always the same, yet somehow different each time it was told. The galaxy's most feared hunter working alongside a human scientist. Death Shadow showing mercy to victims. The predator who had learned to distinguish between prey and innocent beings who deserved protection. On the bridge of the Bone Harvester, Vexthar studied the latest intelligence reports. 7 more human criminals had been captured and delivered to galactic authorities. 3 others had fled to the furthest reaches of known space rather than face the unlikely hunting partnership. The criminal underworld was beginning to fear them more than they feared traditional law enforcement. Dr. Hyok entered the bridge carrying 2 cups of the herbal tea he had introduced to Vexthar's diet. The hunter had initially been suspicious of human beverages, but the complex flavors had proven surprisingly appealing to his enhanced senses. Any new targets? Hyok asked, settling into the chair that had become his customary position during their planning sessions. Several possibilities, Vexthar replied, accepting the tea with a nod of acknowledgement. But I have been thinking about our original agreement. Hyok knew what the hunter meant. When their partnership had begun, Vexthar had made it clear that it was temporary. Eventually, he would return to his original purpose of collecting human trophies for his Hall of Conquest. You are wondering if that time has come, Hyok observed. I am wondering if that time will ever come, Vexthar admitted. These months of hunting criminals have taught me something unexpected about your species. They had indeed learned much together. Each hunt had revealed new aspects of human nature, both dark and light. They had encountered criminals who were pure evil, like Kang Woo-jin. Others who retained fragments of honor despite their crimes, like Oh-sung. Some who had been driven to criminality by desperation rather than malice. But they had also encountered something else. In every system they visited, they found humans who risked their lives to help victims, who stood against injustice despite having no obligation to do so, who showed compassion to beings of species completely different from their own. Your people are contradictions, Vexthar continued. Individually weak, yet capable of facing opponents far stronger than themselves. Lacking natural weapons, yet somehow surviving in a galaxy full of predators. Prone to violence and cruelty, yet also capable of extraordinary kindness. Hyok smiled at the observation. That is what makes us human. It is what makes you unique, Vexthar corrected. I have hunted across 17 star systems. I have encountered hundreds of species. None of them combine such contradictory traits in a single being. The conversation was interrupted by an incoming transmission from Earth. President Chen's face appeared on the main viewing screen, though she looked older and more tired than when Hyok had last spoken with her months ago. Dr. Kim, Vexthar, she began formally. I am contacting you with disturbing news. We have received reports that several alien species are planning a coordinated attack on human colony worlds. Hyok leaned forward with concern. What kind of attack? Military conquest, President Chen replied. Intelligence suggests that our recent partnership has made some species nervous. They view the alliance between humans and the galaxy's most feared predator as a potential threat to the existing power structure. Vexthar's golden eyes narrowed. Which species? The Hegemony Council. They represent 12 different civilizations, including the Krell Empire, the Zephyrian Trade Federation, and the Voltaran Military Alliance. Together they control over 40% of known space. The implications were staggering. If the Hegemony Council had decided that humanity posed a threat, they possessed the military power to eliminate every human colony in the galaxy. Earth's defenses, while improved over the past months, were still no match for a coordinated alien assault. When? Hyok asked. Intelligence estimates they will move within the next 30 days. President Chen replied. We are requesting that you return to Earth immediately. If this alliance is going to mean war, we need every advantage we can find. The transmission ended, leaving Vexithar and Hayok alone with the weight of impending conflict. For several minutes neither spoke as they considered the implications of what they had learned. This is my fault, Hayok said finally. I convinced you to partner with me, knowing it might have consequences for both our species. No, Vexithar replied firmly. This is fear. The other species are afraid because they do not understand what we have become. He rose from his command chair and moved to the viewport, staring out at the stars that suddenly seemed less welcoming than before. They see a human who convinced the galaxy's ultimate predator to show mercy. They see a hunter who chose partnership over conquest. This challenges everything they believe about power and dominance. Hayok joined him at the viewport. What do we do? Vexithar was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a determination that had not been there before. We show them what this partnership really means. 3 weeks later, the Hegemony Council fleet assembled at the edge of human space. Over 300 warships representing the combined military might of 12 species. Their commanders had expected to find Earth's defenses in chaos, perhaps a few desperate patrol vessels trying to mount a final stand. Instead, they found the Bone Harvester waiting for them. The massive hunter vessel hung in space directly between the alien fleet and Earth, its trophy-decorated hull clearly visible against the backdrop of stars. It was a single ship facing an entire armada, yet somehow its presence changed the entire tactical situation. This is Admiral Thex of the Hegemony Council fleet, came the transmission on all frequencies. Vexithar, you will stand aside and allow us to proceed with the pacification of the human threat. The response came from the hunter himself, his voice carrying across space with deadly certainty. I am Vexithar, Death Shadow of the Krell, Master of the Hunt, Keeper of Trophies from 1,000 worlds, and I declare the species known as humans to be under my protection. The declaration sent shockwaves through the alien fleet. Never before had Vexithar protected anything. He killed, he conquered, he collected trophies. The concept of the legendary hunter serving as a guardian was beyond their understanding. You cannot protect an entire species, Admiral Thex replied. Not even you are powerful enough to face our combined forces. Perhaps not, Vexithar acknowledged, but I am powerful enough to ensure that victory comes at a price none of you are willing to pay. What followed was not a battle in any traditional sense. Vexithar began targeting the command ships of each species represented in the fleet. Not to destroy them, but to board them. One by one, he demonstrated that no ship was too large, no defenses too strong to prevent him from reaching its bridge. He did not kill the alien commanders. Instead, he delivered a simple message to each one personally. If they proceeded with their attack on humanity, he would return. And next time, he would not be so merciful. The psychological effect was devastating. These were military officers who commanded fleets and conquered star systems. Yet they found themselves cowering before a single predator who had somehow appeared in their most secure locations as if their defenses meant nothing. By the end of the day, the Hegemony Council fleet had withdrawn. The threat to humanity was over, at least for now. Dr. Hayok met Vexithar in the Bone Harvester's docking bay as the hunter returned from his final intimidation mission. The human's face showed a mixture of gratitude and amazement at what had just occurred. You saved my entire species, Hayok said quietly. I protected something worth preserving, Vexithar replied. That is what hunters do when they find prey that has become more valuable alive than dead. They stood together in comfortable silence, looking out through the bay's viewport at Earth hanging in space before them. The blue and green world looked peaceful from this distance, showing no signs of the crisis that had just been averted. The galaxy will never be the same, Hayok observed. Word of this will spread to every system, every species. They will know that humans have the protection of the ultimate predator. They will know more than that, Vexithar said. They will know that I chose to protect rather than destroy. that I found strength in partnership rather than dominance, that I discovered wisdom in understanding rather than fear. He turned to face the human who had changed everything he thought he knew about hunting, about strength, about what it meant to be a predator. You asked me once why the galaxy's ultimate hunter would show deference to a human, Vexthar said. Now I can give you the answer. Hiok waited, knowing that this moment would define everything that came after. Because you taught me that the greatest hunt is not for prey but for wisdom. You showed me that true strength lies not in what you can destroy but in what you choose to preserve. You proved that even the most perfect predator can evolve beyond his original nature. The words carried across space and time, becoming part of galactic legend. In cantinas and trading posts, in diplomatic chambers and military academies, beings would repeat the story of how a human,